I'm Matt, and I'm the children's pastor in one of the small groups of pastors here at Crossroads, and I'm out behind the church in one of my favorite places just to look over the hill back here. In a few weeks, it's going to be beautiful with the leaves changing and everything, but I just wanted to talk to you about growth for a second. At church the past few weeks, we've talked all about getting connected and being together again, and Kurt and Brad have laid out the paths for us to follow. From joining a small group to serving on a ministry team and just worshiping together on Sunday morning. For some of you, these might be new practices, or some of everybody else, they're old practices. But I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about spiritual growth within those practices, because even if you do these things, your growth might not be immediate. If you were to ask most church people, hey, how does someone grow in their faith? You'd probably get what you might call the Sunday school answer. Just pray and read your Bible. It's that simple. Well, that answer isn't wrong, but there's so much more to it than just praying and reading your Bible. For kids, we explain the pieces that make sense of the Bible and save the more nuanced stuff for later. It's what children's ministry is all about. The problem, though, is that as we get older, we get into high school, we get into college, we become parents, we don't always learn how to update and upgrade our knowledge of Scripture. Which means sometimes we get stuck in overly simplistic or kid versions of the Bible. Today I'm going to share with you one of these stories that you've probably heard before. And I know I've taught it in Crossroads Kids before. But if you haven't heard it before, I know you can relate to it, because something similar has probably happened to you, no matter which of these characters you can relate to most. Now let's re-examine the question from earlier. How do you grow in your faith? You may have been encouraged somewhere in your life to create a quiet time. I call them a regiment, by reading the Bible, praying, journaling, or some combination of these basic elements. For some people, these practices work perfectly, but for others, like me, they're sometimes a struggle, sometimes a hindrance even, because we get we didn't do it today. We get so down on ourselves because we didn't read the Bible, we didn't journal, we didn't do these things. And honestly, it is hard for me to stay disciplined on a regular basis, because I feel that there's so much to do. As a father of 5, as a husband, as a pastor, there's so much to do. So as we read this story today, think about this. What if there's no one right way to spend time with God? I know I love to come outside and I love to look at God's nature. But what if the way you connect with God can be more unique and personal to you than you previously even imagined? In the book of Luke, there's a story recorded about Jesus' interaction with 2 sisters. And in this story, Jesus was traveling all over the country with his followers, teaching crowds and healing the sick. And Jesus' fame was growing, and it was a show-stopping event every time he entered a new town. And in the midst of this countrywide tour, we're going to pick up the story and meet our key characters in Luke chapter 10, verses 38 and 39. And here's what Jesus said. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. There are 2 important phrases here that we can easily miss. We've probably heard this story, right? And if we look closer at the original language and hang out longer in the cultural context, not the context of 2021, we'll find the phrase sat at the Lord's feet. It doesn't mean the literal description of where Mary was sitting, but more of a commentary about posture and a relationship with her teacher. Now, also interesting here, the original Greek implies Mary was continually learning from Jesus, not just in this very moment, these 2 verses. And that Martha, she may have felt abandoned by her sister. So it's possible Mary may have even been one of the Jesus followers who traveled all over the country with him. And while we're in the original language, the Greek implies something else, that Mary and Martha were both disciples of Jesus, but Martha was the only one who welcomed Jesus. Which means, and this may seem obvious, but it's important to our understanding of what's about to happen. Martha owned the home and lived in it, and from all the clues that we get in this little story, Mary didn't. Pretty obvious, right? Luke goes on to say, but Martha was distracted by all her preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." I don't know about you, but distracted is a feeling I can relate to. But if we dig a little deeper than our first impression and take another look at the original language, we find that the kind of distracted Martha isn't the kind we tend to think of. Like chasing squirrels, right? Distracted for her meant greatly troubled or stressed. She was overwhelmed and exhausted, and serving a meal wasn't the only kind of serving Martha was doing. For her, following Jesus looked like doing ministry, from the Greek diakonos. She was doing ministry in her community, but it was a lot for one person to carry. Martha seems to be appealing to Jesus because her sister Mary wasn't stuck at home doing the hard work of serving the community. If Mary really was on the road in a new city every day, walking side by side with the teacher, then Mary's life probably seemed more glamorous and exciting than Martha's, who was home doing what may have been considered the real. Martha wanted help. She wanted to be acknowledged and appreciated for the hard work she was doing. So Jesus responds, "Martha, Martha, Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed." Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Well, notice, though, what Jesus does here, because every part of this response is very important. It's a master. Jesus is a master at communication. Jesus acknowledges Martha and calls her by name twice. Martha's worries and complaints were all about Mary, and she was what she was or wasn't doing, but Jesus recenters the conversation back to Martha. Jesus acknowledges Martha's stress and her very real reaction to the work she'd been doing. He knows she's stressed. He knows she's overwhelmed. But then he says something she surely wasn't expecting and was probably not what she wanted to hear. Jesus didn't run to tell Mary it was time for her to come help her sister. Nah, he didn't call Martha to drop what she was doing and join him on the road either. Instead, Jesus validated the way Mary had chosen to follow him. Jesus didn't compare the work of the two women either. Jesus didn't call Martha to be more Mary-like or vice versa. Jesus celebrated Mary for the way she followed him and affirmed the way Martha followed him. In life, and apparently in faith, competition grows when comparison grows. What's happening with your faith may not look like what's happening with your friend or your coworker or your partner's faith, and the specific ways you find yourself connecting with God don't have to look the same either. I want you to realize that. The reality is there's more than one way to grow in a relationship with God. What's best for you may not be what's best for the person next to you. What's best for you today may not be what's best for you a year from now. The spiritual habits and rhythms that helps your friend truly launch their faith into a new season of growth may not be what's most useful to you. And all of this is more than okay. We're all at our best when we worship and connect with God in ways that are unique to how God designed us. It might seem easier to have an exhaustive list and read that list to you of all the possible ways you can spend time with God. But at the same time, the reality that we can't give you that list shows what a creative and personal God we get to follow, because I can't create that for you. So instead of thinking about your personal time with God as a one-size-fits-all regiment, try thinking of it as a rhythm for you to create. It's on each one of us to try new things, to get out of our rut and experience God in new ways. So I do want to give you some ideas though, all right? And these are by no means all of the possibilities, but maybe one of these ideas can help you launch into something new for you, or maybe even two of them. So if you want to spend time with God in a new way, try one of these. Try silence, solitude, try meditating, try practicing silence, or intentionally finding time to slow down and sit quietly with God. That can help us refocus our mind and our spirits. That's why I love to come out here and get out of my office, because it also helps me appreciate the Creator. Create something. Or we even have a small group that's Artisans for Abba that's all about creating stuff. Because some people just enjoy that. Try connecting with God through art and singing, dancing, painting, film, photography. Those are just to name a few. Maybe even have a conversation for all you extroverts. Maybe you need a new rhythm or an approach to prayer. Maybe you can start having more conversations about God with others over coffee or lunch or dinner or breakfast. And then read and study. So many of our aha moments can be sparked by the pages in this book. Or even a well-chosen book, or like I like to do, I love audiobooks. Or maybe even a class or an online course. Like Mary, we find Jesus when we're sitting at his feet as leaders. Well, support one another. Here's another one. Support one another, because other aha moments and revelations can be sparked while you care for others. And I love to do that. Invest in your community or advocate for somebody else, just like Martha did. We can find Jesus when we're being his hands and feet. None of these ideas are better than the others, or more spiritual, or always more effective, to be honest. The key to spending time with God isn't to do everything, every day, all the time. It's not to find the perfect, unchanging regiment. It's to find a rhythm that helps you better know God right now. And feel free to adjust as you go. So this week, here's our launch. Here's my launch challenge for you. Create or adjust your rhythm for spending time with God and make it personal to you. Because your time with God should be a rhythm